It's that special time of year again where Supercars are making their annual trip across the Nullarbor for the only round of the championship in Western Australia, my hometown, and I'm so excited to have the series back here in Perth. So excited, in fact, I think I'm actually starting to lose my voice, so before that happens, I thought I'd do my usual thing of jumping on the microphone and telling you guys everything you need to know before the cars hit the track for the Perth Supersprint. The circuit is of course Wanneroo Raceway, a road course about 40 minutes outside of the Perth CBD, and it's one of the oldest fixtures on the Supercars calendar, not far off its 100th Supercars race. The track is a good time, not a long time. It's very short at 2.42 k's in length, or just over 1.5 miles in a clockwise direction, featuring 7 turns, and the risk rating around here is low to medium, I would say. You'd be unlucky to hit anything around here, but there's certainly 1 or 2 spots that could catch you out. But the overarching theme of this circuit is tyre degradation. Don't let the layout fool you. This thing absolutely shreds through the Dunlop tyres, mainly because of a lot of sand in the area that leads to a rough racing circuit and lots of sliding. The lap begins with a fairly short run into the first corner, a long right-hander with a few curbs on the inside that the Supercars do tend to dodge as it upsets them round the bend. After that, you go through turn 2, which when you're by yourself, you really don't notice all that much, but it will get your attention if you're close with your neighbor. After that, though, you come up to turn 3. It was reprofiled a few years ago, but the cars still tend to get a little bit of air as they clip the inside curb here. And then as you get back on the deck, you're into one of the only major left-handers on the track through turn 4, and you often have to sacrifice your exit there to get a good run through turn 5, a little flick off to the right, but a very important one that played quite a crucial role, I think, in a lot of overtakes at last year's event with the Gen 3 machines, because a good run through here will either set you up for a move down into turn 6 or perhaps leave you vulnerable to someone behind. Turn 6 is another long right-hander that the tyres absolutely feel the punishment through, and then that sets you up for the back straight where you plunge down the hill and through the 90-degree right-hander of turn 7. Despite only having 7 turns, I've got 3 spots to watch this weekend. The first one may be a bit peculiar, but I want to shout out turn 2, which can actually be very awkward, and I feel like it doesn't always come across on the broadcast, but we sit with a pretty good view of this part of the racetrack, and every year it surprises me just how many close calls there are when leaders are going by lap traffic or someone's exiting the pit lane. It gets very tight through here, and there's a nasty little curb on the left hand side that can flick the cars up on 2 wheels. I just feel like it's a ticking time bomb, and the time is going to run out one day, and I think we might see a little bit of calamity through here. One of the more notable sections of the track, though, is of course turn 3, the S's. They reprofiled this a few years back to give the motorbikes a bit of a safer chicane off to the right hand side. As part of those works, they did reduce the curb height so Supercars don't bounce up on 2 wheels quite as dramatically as they used to, but it's still a high risk part of the racetrack because the concrete on the left hand side is pretty much the closest on any part of this circuit, so you definitely don't want to find yourself in a tangle through there. And the other part of this corner that I'm curious to watch this weekend is if they put a tyre bundle on the apex. That was something they have been doing since they re-tarmacked that section of the racetrack. However, last year it did disappear for Supercars. I suspect because the front bars are quite weak, but fingers crossed now that the cars are a little bit stronger, they reinstall that tyre barrier or that tyre bundle on the apex to help enforce track limits. And speaking of track limits, that brings us down to turn 7. There's lots of runoff on the exit here because it leads you into the old pit lane, but the stewards will be keeping an eye on people abusing that one. And if the officials don't get you, the curb on the outside will. It's a very high curb. Drivers don't like straddling it because the bottom of the car grinds away on that. So yeah, lots of quirks with this final corner, and even when you're trying to pit to get out of the action, this one can catch you out as well. In order to make your way into the pits on the right hand side, you actually have to take turn 7 a lot slower than the guys who are carrying on for another lap, and as a result we see lots of people turned around here. So when do Supercars hit the track? Well, the action gets underway on Friday at about 4:20 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the first practice session, which will go for just 1 hour. The weather conditions are unseasonably warm in Perth at the moment, so it's expected to be about about 28 degrees and sunny. Saturday, it'll be a similar temperature, although the clouds will roll in just a little bit to give us some reprieve, hopefully from that West Australian sun. But the track action gets a little bit hotter with another short practice session in the morning, followed by 3-part knockout qualifying, similar to the way Formula 1 do it, and the first race fairly late on in the afternoon. In fact, 55 laps will get the racing action underway. Basically, copy and paste that format over to the Sunday and just change the times a little bit. It's just about the same old story. Although the curveball for Sunday could be the weather. There are currently showers forecast, particularly in the morning and around lunchtime, although I'm recording this on a Monday, so things could change. Nevertheless, I'm preparing for all seasons, and it'll be interesting to see if the wet weather spices things up. Given the big gap between Supercars events, I did a dedicated news video only a week ago, but there have been some more Supercars headlines ahead of this weekend in Perth. The first one being the head of race who owns Supercars offered a bit of cryptic insight into the Brodie Kostecki saga in an interview recently. My key takeaway from that, though, is that Supercars are working and negotiating with the teams to ensure that they as an organisation can intervene a bit stronger if similar situations like we saw with Kostecki ever arise in the future. The other key takeaway from recent headlines is that Will Brown might be the next Supercars driver to make his NASCAR debut. He's being lined up apparently for a race start at Sonoma Raceway. That one will be interesting to watch. It's all but confirmed, it's just not formally announced just yet. But back here in Australia, the details of the Darwin event, which is next on the schedule, have been announced, and it's headlined by another track to town. This is a great concept. It was rolled out at Bathurst at the start of the year. It was run in Taupo only a few weeks ago as well, and it's where we see the Supercars literally drive from the track into the middle of the local town. It's just a great community event by the looks of things. So good to see that concept expanding to more locations. Back on the track side though, Ludo Lacroix will be splitting his responsibilities in Perth this weekend. He holds a senior leadership position at Newlawn and Premier Racing in an engineering capacity, but Tim Slade's race engineer has departed the team after just 3 rounds. So Ludo Lacroix will be on the tools helping out Tim Slade this weekend, and it will be interesting to see if they get a longer term replacement. Another exciting thing for me, at least, you guys know I hark on about this all the time, but there are signs that the hard tyre has been selected for this year's great race at Mount Panorama. They tried the soft tyre last year. In my opinion, it was an absolute disaster to run that thing during the great race. And I won't bore you with the details, but basically the teams are allowed to order X number of soft and hard tires, and their current allocations that they're allowed to order suggest that there's an extra set of hard tires than would have been expected. So fingers crossed they are to be used at the great race. And then the final item is an exciting one if it comes to fruition, that Supercars may be ready to approach new manufacturers to see if they're interested in joining the grid. The head of race suggested he would like to see 4 manufacturers on the grid. I think that would be a good move for the sport to build up a bit of resilience if a key player drops out. And now that they're starting to get a handle on Gen 3 in terms of, their paritization process and hopefully bringing the cost down in the near future as well, they may be able to attract some new brands to the sport. In terms of Gen 3 watch, there are a few notes to make about the cars themselves this weekend, the most notable being that Dunlop are dropping the minimum tyre pressure by 2 psi. This is a move to hopefully combat some of the overheating issues we see when drivers are following each other, and the goal is that it will make the drivers be able to race harder and for longer. So fingers crossed we do see that replicate on the racetrack. Brad Jones Racing are running an updated bell housing in their cars after the bell housing started cracking towards the end of last year's championship. If that design goes well this weekend, it's set to be rolled out up and down the entire field. And then the last note for Gen 3 is more off down the road, but there's still no timeline for the transient dyno testing. This is the sort of last mountain to climb, in my opinion, when it comes to settling the parity debate, which, mind you, has been a lot quieter so far this year, but certainly it would be great to see that last stone get overturned. Alright, well, what about the action and the storylines this weekend? Well, I've got 4 key points for you to follow. The first is, of course, the updated SuperSprint format. The first time we're going to see it in 2024. For those unacquainted, in previous years, the SuperSprint format consisted of 3 pretty short races, one on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. This year, it's going to be 2 races, one Saturday and one Sunday, but those 2 races are going to be longer. And I'm a big fan of this. I really did not like the 3 short races. For me, they just weren't long enough to bring any sort of, or open any interesting strategic options most of the time. And weirdly, it kind of, for me, diminished the sort of status of supercars at their own event, because you had some support categories, notably the GTs, running longer than the main game, and it just felt like Supercars was diminished to a support category at their own event. So I'm definitely a big fan of the 2 sort of key headline events. I feel like it gives fans something to really look forward to, and hopefully the longer races deliver good action. Speaking of the on-track stuff, I feel like we're approaching the first key junction in this year's championship, because Will Brown has started stealing a march on his teammate Brock Feeney. The gap isn't massive, but there's certainly some momentum in Brown's favor at the moment, so I feel like this weekend is really important for Feeney to try and put an end to that momentum. Perhaps more of a personal curiosity, I am really eager as well to see how the Perth crowds fare this year. Last year there was a massive uptick in the crowd. I think it was about 33%, and it was certainly noticeable trackside. As my first opportunity to see supercars this year, I'm really curious to see if those crowds have been retained and if people come back for the second year of Gen 3. Fingers crossed, because it was a great atmosphere last year, and it'd be good to see the event continue to grow. And then finally, a good news story that I must admit I just stumbled across when prepping this video for you guys. Auto Action covered that Ryan Gilroy is making his Super 2 return this weekend after a nasty crash in practice 1 at Mount Panorama last year. He actually suffered a pretty bad concussion and has only recently been medically cleared to race again, so it's a bit of a shame he's having to sub in for another injured driver in Morse, but also a bit of a good news story that is on his way to recovery, and fingers crossed he has a good return to the series this weekend. Alright, let's start closing this out with the fun part of the show, predictions. Now, don't take this too seriously if you're new around here, because chances are I'll be back in a week's time looking all sheepish when all my predictions are wrong. But my first prediction is that Cameron Waters will get his first win of the season. This follows a terrible start to 2024, where I don't even think he's got a podium yet. So a terrible run of luck despite some promising pace, and fingers crossed he can turn that around this weekend. My second prediction is that Ryan Wood will get his first podium in the main game. This is based on the fact he had a really good strong showing in New Zealand as well with his first top 5, seems to be building some good momentum, and he had a really good result in the Dunlop Series in Perth last year, winning both the races. So it'll be interesting to see if he can continue that form. The one question mark I have is that WAU have struggled here in recent years, so it'll be interesting to see if the team can provide Wood as the driver with the package he needs. My final prediction, as always, isn't something I want to see happen, but I do feel like it's more likely around Wanneroo, and that's that we might see our first Gen 3 rollover. This is just based on the fact cars often enter the sand trap sideways here, and the sand is indeed that. It's sand. It's a really dense sand that often tips the cars up on their side or indeed on their roof. So fingers crossed we don't see it, but statistically I feel like this track may welcome or encourage that kind of incident. As always, I like to get some predictions from you guys, and it was great to see some new names taking part this week as well. So a big thank you if you're new here or have been supporting the channel for a while. Thank you for continuing to interact. I do love including your thoughts in the video, so please keep it coming. The first one here from SC787 saying DJR to be at the front again with Red Bull having a horrible qualifying and race, and Brody Kostecki will fight for wins. Yeah, a few interesting storylines here. The first one, DJR being at the front, that would be a really good result for them, building on a strong New Zealand. I think they'll certainly want to maintain that momentum. Red Bull, and in fact, if anyone has a poor qualifying here statistically, they're usually in for a painful race. I think 2/3 of all the race winners around Perth have come from the front row. And Brody Kostecki, he showed glimmers of that championship pace that last time out in New Zealand, but there was certainly a little bit of rust there with him getting tangled up in a few incidents. So if he's fighting for race wins and only a second round back in the championship, I think that would be a great performance. Second prediction here from Wesser94 saying that, or predicting that he'll get to see a Ford win in person for the first time in a while. It has been a while around Perth, actually, thinking either Moster or Cam to be back at the front. On the same wavelength, I think with Cameron Waters, Moster, again, just not sure. I feel like Perth hasn't been his happiest hunting ground in recent years. And again, a question mark over the ability for the team to deliver here as well. But yeah, I think a Ford victory would be welcomed after some fairly strong Camaro dominance so far in 2024, though it must be said that they've really capitalized on some unfortunate incidents for their rivals on both sides of the brand war. And then the final prediction here from huge TSMC fan saying Red Bull to charge to the front, Ford to contend, and Brody Kostecki podium. Yeah, sort of alluding to some of those other predictions, although that would suggest that Red Bull might have a poor qualifying and still make their way to the front regardless, which would go against what the statistics say. Speaking of statistics, let's wrap this up with the championship standings. As I hinted at earlier in the video, Will Brown is starting to eke out a little bit of a lead now over his teammate Brock Feeney. Chaz Moster is still doing quite well there, in fact, in third, so they'll be looking to capitalize this weekend. Richie Stanaway, a bit of a quiet achiever there in fourth on 520 points. Matt Payne just behind him. Nick Percat, another one of those quiet achievers, although he does have a race win under his belt already, in sixth. Jack LeBrock in seventh. Heimgartner, who is a now local Perth resident, in eighth, and Will Davison in ninth. On the team side of things are a bit more convincing for Red Bull, nearly 500 points ahead of Penrite Racing. Erebus in third, Shell V-Power in fourth, WAU in fifth, DeWalt and Trady in sixth, Tyre Power and Bendix, MSR, they're in seventh. The Tickford guys are in eighth, and one half of the Brad Jones Racing team are in ninth. Of course, Supercars are supported by a bunch of other categories, and it's a fairly decent lineup this weekend. We of course have the Dunlop Series, Super 2 and Super 3, who always put on a good show around Wanneroo Raceway. Touring Car Masters are back. We haven't seen these guys in Perth for a very long time, so great to see those old classics back on the circuit. Aussie Racing Cars, the little buzz bots, they're going to be terrorizing these 7 corners around Perth. And then just to calm things down a little bit, we do have the Radical Cup Australia as well. But that will bring my round 4 preview to a close. It's going to be a busy weekend for me. I'm going to be running around, taking lots of photos, trying to update my library for use here for the rest of the season. Of course, I'm going to sit back and enjoy the action as well. It's the one time we get Supercars here in the West, and I'm excited as always to see how it all unfolds. Until then, be sure to treat people like a trackside down there in the comments. Thank you as always for your support, and I will see you on the other side of this weekend's racing.